Hello, you're behind the screen with Dr. Joel B. Goodin in my Driven to Doctorate series, produced by me, the Dissertation Life Coach. Today we're talking about the Doctoral Dissertation feedback hacks, 10 secrets to finish your dissertation faster. We're going to talk about iterative work and what that means to be in an iterative process. We're going to talk about what feedback should address, naming your document, a brief list of things to avoid and things to do, tracking changes if you're the student, and what you should expect in terms of track changes when a professor is doing it, highlighting and comment bubbles in conversation that you can see and respond to, and how to respond to those comments, how to be less overwhelmed generally with all the feedback that you get, and the feeling that scholarly writing may not always sound like you, and how to get used to that. That's what we're talking about today. Overall, a lot of people think my job is to get them through the dissertation, and that is correct. You're not wrong. However, there's more to it than just that. In fact, that's really the process of the product. We're going to focus more on the process. My job is really not just to get a paper made, but it's what happens during that process of getting the document from point A to point Z. My job is to help you learn to write very well, to know how to do research very well, and think like a researcher and a scientist, to have critical thinking abilities. Overall, you will become a problem solver. Now, iterative work is different than traditional coursework. So far in your coursework, probably throughout your bachelor's, master's, and even your doctoral coursework, unless you had maybe a master's thesis or something like that, you've probably done everything in terms of assignments. You get an assignment, you turn it in, you get it back with feedback and a grade, and you don't have to work on it anymore. It's over. You move on to the next assignment. Sometimes there are resubmissions. If you want to improve your grade a little bit, you do get a grade. But it goes on like that. It's sort of a one-hit wonder sort of thing. It's a one-time situation. Whereas the dissertation process is more like an endless round of resubmissions. It's cyclical. You send your document to the dissertation chair or the committee members, and they send you feedback. You respond to that feedback, and they give you feedback on how you've revised your document. You work on whatever they suggest from there, and it's slowly inching you along from point A to point Z of the dissertation, constantly progressing. Sometimes it feels like you go 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back, or even 4 steps back at times. Sometimes we do need to take stock of where we're at, modify our approach, and change something that we had previously accepted in order to move forward in a more strategic way. Iterative work is different than that traditional coursework. It requires initial and consistent hard work by the student. The student has to put the work out there and then constantly be responding with their hardest work, their highest level of effort. It requires a willingness to accept feedback, some humility, some understanding that the professor is the guide, the mentor, but they're imperfect humans. They're not always going to say things as kindly as they could or should. This is something I constantly work on. How can I say this in a kinder way? And a lot of my students would probably say, he really needs to work on that. And they're probably right. I can always be improving in this way. But as a student, you're not going to get a lot out of sort of taking your chair to task on their kindness and their supportive abilities. Now, you can reach out if they seem especially harsh. You can tell them, sort of guide them with sort of some reinforcement and say, I really liked it when you said some positive things. You can guide them and get the most out of your dissertation chair. That willingness to accept feedback, though, requires some humility and some understanding that even though the chair is imperfect, the feedback may be imperfect, that they're really doing their best to give you good advice. Really, they just want to do the best job they can and then go about their business of watching TV, eating dinner, playing with their kids, just like the rest of us. It requires revision and learning patterns of feedback that you get. So when you get feedback from a professor, you don't want to just ignore it, first of all. You want to revise it. And you want to revise it thoroughly throughout your document, everywhere in your document. And you want to remember the feedback you get each time and say, oh, that wasn't just in this one area where I should apply that feedback. That's throughout the entire document forever until I get to point Z in the dissertation process. And so if they say something like, there's no comma before et al., then remember that. Don't make them say it again. That's one of the most sort of ridiculous and silly but irritating things that a chair or a committee member can get, is having to say the same thing 10 times. And as a student, I can only imagine it would be irritating to hear it 10, 20, 30 times as well. So let's get it right the first time. Make a list of things you need to learn and constantly be checking for those things as you proceed with your dissertation. In terms of iteration, it is a type of conversation that takes place using the comments and track changes in the column to the right of your body text. So as they insert a comment, that will appear to the right of your body text, and you can reply to those comments and have a conversation in that column. Also, the track changes you make and that your professor make, those are also a way to show your professor, I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm making revisions, and your professor can also model behavior with track changes. Here's how you might word this. Here's some of the wording that could be useful for you. Here's a misspelling that I'm fixing for you. Sometimes they may not fix a misspelling. They want you to fix it or fix a different issue, maybe one that you'll need to learn, and they won't fix it for you in order to draw your attention to it and have you start the process of practicing fixing that issue. Feedback should address generally two big things: writing mechanics, that's spelling, grammar, the flow of the discussion that you're writing, paragraphing, things like that, APA formatting, and content, meeting the assignment directions or instructions, or when it's a dissertation, the dissertation criteria. What is being asked of you? What will be the minimal standards that assess and evaluate and eventually say this dissertation is done? But before that, we have milestones along the way of the dissertation to say you've successfully completed chapter 1, you've successfully completed chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so the rubric and criteria are those evaluation criteria that will be used to assess whether you've met those milestones and eventually whether you become a PhD or EDD or whatever type of doctorate you're going for. So specifically though, feedback addresses mistakes, opportunities, praising students, sometimes giving areas of opportunity or negative feedback. When you miss a revision that needs to take place, they're going to call you out on that and say, hey, you didn't do what I asked here. Please do it. And again, that's one of those things. Try not to make your chair or professor or committee member ever say something twice, give the same feedback twice. Now, it's going to happen, but do your best to minimize the amount of times that occurs. Writing mechanics are always going to be something that your chair is guiding you on. They're going to be doing sort of a superficial or moderate level of giving you advice on your writing mechanics. Sometimes if you have a lot of problems with writing mechanics, they will advise you to hire an editor. And when you do hire an editor or a dissertation coach, or you work with sort of the staff at the university that helps with writing, maybe a writing center, you want to make sure that you're learning whatever it is they're doing. You want to get to the end of the dissertation, earn that PhD title, and not be left not knowing how to write well or do statistics well. Whatever assistance you get during the dissertation, you need to learn whatever that person assisting you is helping you with. So if it's statistics, learn what they're doing on your behalf with you. It's also more ethical to do it that way. That way you can say, I did this dissertation wholly, 100%. I know what I did. I know how to do it. I can do it again. Qualitative data analysis, writing in a scholarly way. You don't want to get into a job that hired you based on your PhD and your dissertation, and the new company sees that you're not able to do something that was presented in your dissertation. The writing was very good in your dissertation, but now at the job, you're not showing that you can write that well. So it's important that you learn the skills along the way. Finally, you're going to get that specific feedback on the content and how it meets the rubric criteria. Next, we're going to go into phase 2 of this video episode and start to talk about the applied issues, how to apply all this in terms of writing, in terms of phases of iteration, from you submitting to getting feedback, responding to that feedback, and getting more feedback. That process goes on and on. In this applied portion of this video, we're going to talk about how to actually start making the revisions, responding to feedback, the process of iteration between you and the professor. And we're going to start with giving our document a good name. It might be more fun to write Fun Day Monday draft, but let's give it a title and name and organizational structure that will be helpful. We're going to look, I've got a folder called Graduate School. In that folder, I'm going to create a new folder called Dissertation Drafts. Instead of calling it New Document, which is the default, let's call it my first two initials and my last name. And then I'm going to put the date in, because you want to save every draft of your document that you can. Drafts don't take up too much space, especially in the earlier stages. And so you might make a mistake on the 5th that you want to go back to the 4th or the 3rd. And so we're going to title this with today's date, whatever day we're working on it. The other thing is that I want you to realize that you need to carve out time to work on your dissertation whenever you can, as often as possible, in the morning before your kids wake up, in the evening after people go to bed. Whenever you can carve out time, put yourself in front of the computer for 15 minutes every day. Hopefully that 15 minutes minimum will turn into an hour. You'll gain some momentum, you'll get in a groove, you'll have some flow. Make sure that's protected time without kids running back and forth behind you, interrupting you, disrupting your process, with the FedEx guy, the UPS guy, people, all those people that can distract you. Try to put yourself in a room where you're going to be able to make progress without disruption. And so thinking that you will work on this more than once a day, it's 2 p.m. now where I'm located. So I'm going to put 2 p.m. as the date. I might work on it at 8 p.m. later. So now I've got it saved with a useful strategic name that is timestamped as well. And so now I can send this to my chair and begin this process of iterative feedback and revision. After we name our document, I want to talk about some things to avoid and some things to do. Things to avoid generally are contractions, colloquial or conversational writing. We want to get that scholarly writing, vague wording, vague antecedents, modifiers. And in terms of things to do, use the Oxford comma when you have a list of things in a sentence like, I will be doing A, comma, B, comma, and C today. It's that comma before the and. You want to always include the Oxford comma if you're using APA formatting. And so you want to make sure you don't ignore feedback. You want to always get the feedback addressed and corrected the first time, every time. You don't want your professor to have to repeat it over and over and over again, and you don't want to hear it over and over and over again. Make a list of the things you need to learn, that you're learning and that you aren't good at yet, and always start checking for them and making revisions on your own. Self-revise, self-review your work so that your chair has to do less and less. You want to maximize the potential of your chair. Use your chair to the best of your ability to minimize what they have to do that's in the weeds, and have them focus on the higher order, macro level, trees, forest issues. Again, help them not have to say things over and over and over again. Are you going to be able to do that? Not perfectly. You're going to miss things, and the chair will have to remind you. But this is a way to use your chair optimally to get the most out of your chair. Use the Oxford comma, don't ignore feedback, and correct all errors. Again, those are the weeds. You want your chair focusing on the forest and the trees, not the weeds under the trees. Of course, Grammarly, Microsoft Editor, or even hiring an editor can help. Your chair can guide you in whether you might need an editor or a dissertation coach, or to use the writing services at your university. But if you use those services, and perhaps it's a statistician or somebody to help you with your qualitative data analysis, whatever they're doing for you, you need to learn. You need to be able to do it by the end of your dissertation. Otherwise, a potential employer is going to perhaps hire you based on what your dissertation shows, your abilities that they think you have. And if you've hired an editor to really make it look nice, when you don't actually work with the editor to learn why they're making the changes they're making, and learn to hand it off to you to make those changes on your own as they teach you, whereas they do stats with you and teach you how to do those stats, or that qualitative data analysis, whatever it may be, you need to learn whatever they're helping you with and not have them do it for you, so that you don't lose the job that you just got for having this doctorate, for having this dissertation that shows these skills, because you don't actually know those skills. You want to learn them as you go. It's one of the most important parts of the dissertation is having that skill set when you're done. And so next we're going to look at this process of tracking changes, what you should expect in terms of tracking changes as a student, and what you should expect in terms of what your professor will do in terms of tracking changes. So first, let's fix some errors. Here we see Grammarly, Microsoft Editor, giving us some things that are obvious potential mistakes. And so here I'm going to turn on track changes. It's on right now. Now let's look and see that this is all white across the board. Normally we're on the home screen. Okay, we're going to switch to the review screen, and we're going to turn this button gray. We see that all markup is on, so that it's going to show every change we make. Let's look at an example. We just did that. Okay, tracking changes example. Let's call it that. Now let's say that we think maybe I should put this as a header level 1. Now I'm tracking changes. I'm going to change this to heading level 1. I'm going to center it, and I'm going to turn it black. I'm also going to use this button to add a space after the paragraph. I'm also going to bold it. Most heading level 1s are in bold. And so now I've got this, and it shows the changes I made over here. So my chair can see that I made that change, especially if they've requested it. They want to see the evidence that you made the change. It may be obvious to you, but the chair's not going to remember everything they told you to do. And so they may have a comment that says, make this change. But it may have been a phone call or a Zoom call or a Skype or Teams or whatever you're using. And they may have asked you to change this. And here you can show, look, I've changed this. And so now we're going to look at a bit of the content. And let's say we send it to our chair at this point. So this is phase 1, chair feedback. Our chair may look at this and say, okay, I notice here that you have the wrong word. And I might even, as the chair, say, please correct all errors before each submission. Okay? And that's just a reminder of always trim out the weeds so I can focus on the trees in the forest. It's a lifestyle. I'm creating a culture of scholars. I'm convinced that if my students follow my directions, they can have, and I might suggest that as the chair that you write academic success. And that I call these mentees instead. Okay? And then they might go on to say something like, even though they fix this for you, they're not going to fix it every time, so they want you to always use scholarly wording. Replace colloquial, conversational wording. Okay? I got into this. That sounds very colloquial. So maybe they highlight it and say colloquial. Please address. Okay, and misspelled it. I got into this. What is this? This is actually a vague modifier, a vague antecedent. By getting really pumped, let's use a more scholarly word. About the work I was doing with my doctoral students, this might consider I realized how much help they needed. Maybe I could highlight this to show the student this word could be better. Definitely this word could be more scholarly because this road is hard. This is an issue of colloquial wording. I got more experience working with students. Again, we've changed these to mentees. So we want to follow that feedback, and the chair should be consistent as much as possible. I began to do this. What does this refer to? And in vague antecedents and modifiers, we want to change it to summarize what we're actually saying. This, that, these, those, it. Those words are vague words vague antecedents and modifiers that we can replace with clarity, clear words. Making videos to explain all the core skills and techniques to finish what? Complete the dissertation? Perhaps. Now I provide these videos to you in hopes that you will benefit. Please like, subscribe. I'm going to note as the chair that there's another spelling. Please address all writing mechanics issues throughout. Smash. Maybe we'll say click. Now obviously this isn't a dissertation, but here we have something to work with. This is just an example, and I really do have this business, so this is something that I could be working on. You'll get this back from the chair. If this were me, I would save it and send it back to you with a change of time, because I'm on the same day, and my initials at the end. Now, this is phase 2. You're the student again, and you've got the document, and you realize, okay, they've made some changes for me. The chair has. I like this. Let's accept. This is how we accept. I'm accepting the formatting and the change. Here, the chair did not make the change for me, so I'm going to fix it myself and show the chair that I addressed this. Now this is when we get into how to respond to feedback. We want to tell our chair a number of options. Fixed. I think it's fixed. I don't know how to fix it. I haven't gotten to this yet. Or can we discuss? And you might say, can we discuss, if maybe you disagree with your chair on a revision piece of feedback that they made, and you are becoming a PhD, so to some extent you need to have a voice. If you have really good logic for why you had something the way you had it, and the chair is suggesting something else, then you might ask your chair to talk about it and explain your rationale. But you'll want to use one of these sorts of responses by clicking reply and putting that in one of these options, not all of them. One of these options. Use fixed sparingly, only if you're absolutely 110%, which isn't possible, but 110% sure that you've corrected the error appropriately. Here I would say fixed, or I think it's fixed. That way the chair can come behind you and say, you wrote fixed, or I think it's fixed. I agree, right? Or I disagree. I don't know how to fix it. They can reach out to you and provide, maybe they provide a little more feedback, a little more, maybe they get you on a Zoom call or a phone call and help you. I haven't gotten to this yet. That just shows the chair that you're not ignoring their feedback, you just haven't gotten to it yet. And can we discuss? Yes, you can make a list of all the things you want to discuss, and next time we meet, we can have a meeting to discuss that. Here the chair suggested some wording changes. This was too colloquial. And I'm realizing as I fix this, okay, and I cut out some words I already had, but put them back in. Now let's see. Okay, with my doctoral students, I like that. I realized how much I can use the word assistance. They required. And I'm going to change this to say it was not an issue of their intelligence. Rather, their need for assistance was related to the enormity and complexity of the dissertation process. Okay, I've already got that period there, so I don't need to add it. So as I gained experience with working with doctoral students, see, I'm changing my mind a bit, but nothing substantial. I began to, let's be clear about this, I began to create resources. Okay? And then instead of a hyphen, for instance, I made explanatory videos regarding the core skills and techniques that would support all right, so their ultimate academic success. This is sounding much better, and I'm doing this as the student to send back to my chair. Now I provide these, I'm going to say, services and resources to you instead of to you, I'm going to say to my mentees. Let's try to avoid talking directly to the to our reader or who we're presenting to, my mentees, to encourage, motivate, and support them. That sounds a little better, I think. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, and press the like button, or give the, we want to avoid this word, the video 5 stars. Okay, now as the student, it's not really a half hour later, but let's say it's the next day. And it's 12:30 p.m. and your initials as the student, whatever those may be, and we're going to save that. Now we send this back to the chair, and the chair should say things, hopefully some very positive praise. Very nice job. Good job addressing scholarly writing issues throughout. Well done. Whoa. Smiley face, because it makes it feel all better. Vague modifier and antecedent. Thank you for noticing this. Put this on your list of things to check. And they should always be, hopefully, giving you more feedback, more guidance. This, that, these, those, it. Those words are vague antecedents and modifiers often. More scholarly wording, please. well done. The chair might say, consider alternative wording. You did. Well done in improving writing throughout. Complete the dissertation. You might say, they might say, I like how you changed the wording here. Now, it's not necessarily that you use the exact wording that they offered. Generally, I suggest doing it. It's easy. But you may have had something else in mind. And so when you make the change, they may be impressed by that. Spelling issue. Nice work. And overall, they may give you some overall guidance. Good writing improvement. I think you captured the essence of what was required and responded to the feedback very effectively. Keep up the good work. Let me know if you have any additional questions. And as I often try to do, I'll insert an emoji, something, a smiley face, just to say, hey, I'm a person. The other thing I do is do video feedback where I put my face in the corner, sort of like this video, to say, look, I'm here with you. This is a process. When you get this back as a student, now, most chairs are not going to have it back this quickly. I typically do because I like to work quickly with students. I'm going to send this back to the student. The student can look at it and say, okay, chair liked what I had throughout. And I'll go through each one and I'll click accept generally. Especially these are changes I made that the chair liked, so I'm going to click accept. What if the chair had said, you know, I don't like this change to resistance, and they had made a comment to that effect? Well, I could reject that change and put whatever word, let's say help instead. So I can reject the change of assistance. Now, let's say that you're overwhelmed by all of this. We can change to simple markup, and we don't have to see. We can see that there were changes made where the red line is on the left, and we can still see the comments, but it's just not overwhelming with all the lines everywhere, the colors, the wording. Or if even this is still too much, we can go to no markup. Understand that if I make a change, let's say it was chapter 1, I just added those words, that if the chair switches to all markup, they can see everything I've added, including this that I changed when no markup was showing, but I had track changes on. Ultimately, I'm going to accept all these changes, and I'm going to usually, unless it's a criteria issue, I'm going to start deleting comments. Normally as a chair, I tell the student, once I write good job, this is fixed, good job, you've addressed this well, they can delete the comments, and this starts to minimize the amount of traffic you have on the side of the paper. Here we have a pretty decent final draft of this work. So we had things to avoid, tracking changes. you're showing your chair, here's what I added. We talked about how to turn them on and off. We looked at how tracking changes works, what it looks like, how to change views of the markup, and checking no markup, which we can always do. If we want, before we send it to the chair, we can look at it like this, because sometimes there will be an issue like this when we track changes that we may not notice it with all these lines everywhere. So switching to no markup before we send it to our chair can help us identify, oh, there's an issue here. Let me fix that. And then we accept all the changes. We can accept them one at a time. If we highlight all this, it won't do one at a time. It'll accept everything within the highlighted region. But we can do this. Try to look at everything as you go. Try not to just accept all. We've done now one at a time, and then we're going to take out these comments, assuming that the chair was done and we resolved all the issues. Now, a chair is going to track changes too for us, like we saw, but they're going to do it sparingly because they want us to focus on making changes ourselves. They want us to practice making the changes. So they're going to model some scholarly writing for us, but they're also going to sometimes put a comment and say, this needs a more scholarly word, and they're sort of going to test us. One thing I'm seeing that hasn't been addressed here, it is, we want to avoid, so if the chair got this back, they may realize, hey, I didn't tell the student to get rid of contractions. And they may write, avoid contractions in scholarly writing. Okay. And they fixed it for us, but they're also showing us here. And they might highlight this so that you can fix it later. And there may be more you want to check throughout and from here on after, so that you don't make this mistake again to the extent possible. Perfection isn't possible, but strive for it. Now, chairs are going to track changes for you sparingly. They're going to model scholarly writing, and they're going to model how to address the content and criteria needs. They're going to also model attention to addressing that criteria. Here's a wording that you might use. Here's what it's really asking for. I often offer some formulaic sentences where the students sort of fill it in. They have to do the true thinking, but I give them sort of a template. Now, they may highlight, like I did with the yellow, highlight where there are multiple mistakes being made. So they might have highlighted this third time that you started using a contraction again. And that's just a faster way to, instead of adding another comment, contraction, etc. Or they might write fixed throughout and then highlight a few things. And they'll also highlight when you've ignored feedback. They might write something like, if they realize you've ignored it, please address throughout. And they might put it in yellow highlight. And this is not in the body text, it's within the feedback comments. I often will highlight feedback comments to get more attention from the student. In fact, if a student ignores this again, I'll often turn this to orange or red or something like that to try to get more attention. Students ignoring this piece of feedback, maybe not on purpose, they just didn't see it. I want them to see it, and so I draw their attention to it. Responding to comments, we talked about this, clicking reply, saying I fixed it, I think I fixed it, I don't know how to fix it, I haven't gotten to this yet, or can we please have a discussion? Overall, this can be quite overwhelming with all the lines going everywhere, fixing documents, fixing not just one page, not just 2 paragraphs as we see here, but fixing chapters of content, sections of content. You got to stay chilled out. You got to relax. You got to realize the chair's doing the best they can to just do their job as well as they can. Hopefully, most chairs are doing the best they can so that they can do their job, so that you can work on it while they're sleeping, while they're eating, while they're doing other things, reviewing other papers. They may not present it perfectly, but you need to dust off the grit and grime, the imperfectness of the feedback that you get, and find the gold underneath what's useful, the feedback that's useful. You need to be gritty. You need to be thick-skinned. You need to stay motivated. Take the feedback one piece of feedback at a time. Remember that professors are trying to help you choose a good time in your day, and even maybe not today, maybe tomorrow. If you're in a bad mood, you may not be in your best shape, or it may not be the best time for you to address feedback. Remember to choose a good time to review and revise, and that can also include when do you have protected time, when children or husbands, wives, partners may be disrupting your process. Use the different views of feedback, switching from all markup to simple markup, or even no markup as needed, to help sort of decrease the overwhelm you may feel. And finally, if it's a video feedback, or even if it's just written feedback, pause the video or take a break, mark your spot with a comment. Say, I revised to this point at 8:30 p.m. Make a note to yourself of where you stopped and where you should pick up after dinner or something like that, after you use the restroom, after you put the kids in bed. Make a note to yourself of where you stopped and what you've accomplished. Pause the feedback, especially when you start getting overwhelmed. Do some meditation, some mindfulness techniques. Now you may think, overall, I get this. I understand what you're trying to say, Goodin. But this doesn't sound like me anymore once we write this so differently. And I say, well, part of the process of doing the dissertation is to learn to write like a scholar. And that doesn't mean write with flowery prose and poetic sort of verbiage. We want to write almost like most other scholars, and it's this sort of technical scholarly wording that we use and that most other people would use, so that to some degree you may not even be able to tell who wrote what, because it's somewhat bland. It should be concise, succinct, and clear. And so you say, well, that's boring. But that's how scientific scholarly writing is meant to be. It's something that you need to learn. It's not meant to be flowery or poetic, and it's meant to be clear and succinct. So take that with a grain of salt. Show your chair overall that you are grateful for their feedback. Show them where you made changes. Make their lives as easy as possible so that you get the most out of your chair every time. So we've covered a lot of things. Iterative feedback, what feedback addresses, naming your document, a brief list of do's and don'ts, what tracking changes looks like by the student, what it looks like by the professor, highlighting and commenting in the conversation you can have in the column by just clicking this and saying, Dr. Goodin, thank you so much for explaining this issue. And hopefully we go here and fix our writing error. How to respond to comments generally, fixed, not fixed. I don't know how to fix it, things like that. How to be less overwhelmed, and then how to deal with becoming a scholar and the feeling that you may have of this doesn't sound like me anymore, and that's part of obtaining, earning, and learning the doctorate identity. And that's going to continue long after you defend your dissertation and they say, congratulations, Dr. So-and-so, fill in your name here. It's going to take years after you've earned the doctorate, once you start getting into new jobs, more research that you do, showing your expertise, and building upon that small foundation. It may not seem small, but the dissertation is only the beginning. You build upon that foundation, create research tracks where you become known for doing certain types of research on certain populations regarding certain types of content. And you build a name for yourself, and you learn what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you're most interested in, how the field is emerging, and how you can contribute your scholarly voice to the academic conversation. Thank you for your time. This has been Driven to Doctorate, Behind the Screens with Dr. Joel B. Goodin, the Dissertation Life Coach. Thank you.